joining me in this Saturday afternoon time. I really appreciate you all coming. So my name is Wen. I'm currently a rising senior studying computer science at the University of Washington, Seattle. And I have been doing a couple of internships throughout my college times. Right now, I'm currently a software engineering intern at Cloudflare, doing a remote internship because of COVID. And last summer, I've been a UX engineering intern at Microsoft. And the summer before, I was a new technologist participant. And after graduating from high school, I also was a high school intern at Autodesk as a software engineering intern. And I'm pretty happy to go a little bit deeper into each of these experiences when we get to our question later. And other than my internship positions, I'm also currently a head teaching assistant for one of the data programming classes at my school. And I'm also a rewriting the code fellow, which is like a college women community in tech. But yeah, that's basically about me, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for being here today. We'll get started on our first question, which is, what inspired you to pursue computer science?
Yeah, that's a good question. So just a little bit more background about me. So I actually moved here to the US from China 5 years ago with my parents. So before I moved here, I actually have zero exposure to programming. So and then I just have a free summer after I move because in China there's a lot of homework, so I don't really have free time to kind of explore what I want to do. So I have a free summer after I moved, and then I started playing a lot of video games, and I started watching a video on how video games are made. And then it just really fascinated me on how the programmers actually encode all those logic into video games with coding. So that just kind of intrigued my interest in coding in general. And after I started high school here, I also got involved in the first robotics competition and joined the programming team in the robotics team in high school. The moment that I really feel like CS is something that excites me is when I wrote a for loop that actually makes fancy LED patterns. Because for me, it is the first time that I actually see the power of how you can make real things happen with code. And then after that, I just did a lot of digging around and exploring a lot of resources and kind of learn programming at my own time. I also took an intro to programming class when I was doing a high school summer college program at Stanford. And that kind of gives me a little bit more theoretical background and actually learn how to think like a programmer. And later, I just get a lot more involved into my programming team during my senior year of high school. And I really enjoy the problem solving process and also finding out what's broken. And that kind of gives me a really solid idea of I want to pursue a CS major in college. But yeah, that's basically the story.
Wow, that's really interesting. Could I actually ask you which game really inspired you to start coding, and what language you started off with from your
Yeah, so the game that kind of intrigues me is actually Assassin's Creed. Maybe some of you know the series, but I'm really a big fan of the earlier Assassin's Creed series. And then I played them a lot. But then when I actually started coding video games, I actually took a video games programming class at my high school, and the tool they use is called DigitPen. So it's more like a drag and drop where you can build the interface, but you can also integrate really simple code. And I'm not sure what the language is, now thinking about it. But after that, I also tried to build video games in Unity, which is a game engine where you can use C# as a language to build video games. And it's a really cool engine too.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll be moving to our second question now, which is, do you have any advice for aspiring students in the tech field?
Yeah, I guess my biggest advice is definitely do what excites you. For me, what gets me excited about computer science in the first place is video games. So even though right now I am shifting more towards like web development and app development, just like try to figure out like what's the best, how to create like the best experience for my users. My initial like entry point is video games. So definitely if you're interested in building something, just start finding resources, and there's tons of online resources nowadays available. Like there are free Coursera courses and all those like Medium articles people like just write up and just show you how they make their own app. So if you're interested in any of those, just start like reaching out on those online resources and start looking into it, because you don't want to start off with something that is kind of boring, because that will never carry you far. That's basically my biggest advice.
Okay. Do you have any like recommendations or like places that you think people should start off with, like something that they should do to start off with before they, try to get into the tech field?
Um, So I guess my advice is to, if your school is offering like CS classes, definitely take those classes, because it's really like learning CS or programming is like really crucial that you kind of like in the mindset of how to program. It's something that you kind of need some prior training on in order to get into it. But it's not like uh, so I would say like programming is not something that have a really high bar entry. Like when I was in China, I always thought that you need to be really smart, you need to be really good at math in order to get really good at coding. But it's not true, because like once I get really excited about something and decide to made up my mind to build it, I can like look up resources and start like realizing my own idea and creativity in through programming. And through that actually kind of helped me practice my logical thinking and get me better at math as well. So I would say definitely start looking at something that interests you, and then look at some online tutorials. But yeah, hope that's helpful.
Okay, so third question. As a woman in the tech field, did you experience any gender biases in school or while you were applying for internship positions?
Yeah. So fortunately, I didn't actually experience any biases that specifically targeted against me in those like when I'm applying for internships or within classes. But once you are in like the CS major, or once you started doing all those like technical internships, you do start to feel that pressure, because you kind of look around you and you just see guys everywhere basically. So when I get into CS at UW, it's just really apparent that when you look around the classroom, most of the people are guys, and then you just see a couple of girls gathering around. And that is part of the reason why it's super important as like a woman in tech. You want to be really good at finding that community and like use the resources shared by that community. And even when I'm currently in my current internship, when all the engineering teammates on my team are men, but then so it's just you can feel like there's still a gender imbalance in the dev field, in the tech field, definitely. But the one good thing is that the tech field is kind of striving to gain more diversity when they're hiring in their hiring process. So use this type of push to your advantage, because the tech industry is actually looking for more women engineers to join their team, because they believe that you can contribute really valuable perspectives and skill sets. And there are also a lot of great communities out there to support women. For example, like this one, GirlsCodeIt. I don't think guys have this type of organizations, so definitely make use of these. And for me, my community is like Rewriting a Code, which is like an online Facebook community where people just like sharing resources on like how to prepare for interviews, how to prepare for internships, and things like that. Those resources just like online. So definitely keep an eye out for those communities.
Do you think like being in a class with women, like small amount of, girls or like women, do you think it brought you guys closer together as friends, or did you like maybe not talk to them during the year?
I think it definitely bring us closer as friends. That because like you share the identity as a woman and kind of like a minority in this field is really when you start like chatting with each other, it's really natural that you share that kind of connection. In terms of like you can like complain about how there's just guys everywhere, and then you can also talk about some like common experience, like how do you overcome the imposter syndrome or overcome that kind of like you don't want to you want to kind of like prove yourself to be as good as guys just because you're a minority, which is like basically not true, but that kind of urge still exists because of like the gender imbalance.
Hmm. We're going to move on to our fourth question then. Thank you for this one.
Mhm.
What was the Microsoft internship application process like, and how did you prepare for your interviews?
Yeah, so for the Microsoft internship application, the traditional route is that you will fill out an online application form where you just fill out some basic information and also upload your resume. And if you have a good enough resume, the recruiters will reach out to you and schedule a phone screen. So you like kind of chat with them on some like behavioral question, like tell me about how you work with a team, or tell me about your time you have to overcome some obstacles. And after that, if they still think you're a good fit to a company, you move on to like technical interviews. And in this, I think like the final round of this process is actually on site. So you would actually go to like at least in the normal circumstances, you would go to the actual Microsoft Redmond campus. Or if you're somewhere not in Seattle, maybe you would go to the other campuses. But then in the Reading campus, you just go through a whole day of back-to-back interviews, and you meet with people in different roles. So for my experience is a little bit different from the traditional one, just because I have participated in the new technologies program in the summer of my freshman year. So for those of you who are not familiar with that program, it's basically a 7-week academy type program where you learn the whole product development cycle from like ideation, thinking about what the need of customer is, to creating like a mock-up of like the idea or the app that you're trying to build to target the problem statement that you try to solve. And finally, you work with a team of other college students to kind of build up that app together. And that program is kind of designed specifically for freshmen and sophomores, so people who don't have a lot of like technical background. So it's like so it kind of has a lower expectation in terms of like what background you want to come in. So I was a participant in that program and I have a really great experience. And after that, I got a referral from a coach in that program. And he kind of recommended to me to do this UX engineering internship. So I kind of skipped the like online application and like the phone screen, and I go straight to on-site. So for my experience, the first like I have a round with like engineers, just asking some whiteboarding questions. So you need to actually write down code on the whiteboard when they ask you a question, and that is mostly testing your technical skills and how well you are in terms of like communicating your thought process. I also have interviews with like a project manager, and it's mostly like testing my design skills, like how do I create this wireframe and also draw them on the whiteboard. And later I have a lunch interview with like an engineering manager, and it's mostly him asking a little bit a little bit about me, but mostly is me asking a question to him as well, like asking why do you work in this team? Like what kind of intern projects are you expecting me to do for the summer? And finally, it's more like a final round with an engineering, no, a design director at Microsoft. So it's someone who are more higher up. And the question she mostly asked me was about like where do I see myself in 5 years and things like that. So because the role I'm interviewing for is UX engineering, so it has kind of a blend between like design and engineering. If you are going for like software engineering roles, you probably will get a lot more like technical focus back-to-back interviews. But yeah, that's basically my interview experience at Microsoft.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I think that would help a lot of people a lot, just knowing that process. So next question is, what was your day-to-day life like as a software engineer intern?
Yeah, I guess I can just use my experience right now because, again, I'm a software engineering intern at Cloudflare. So the project that I'm working on this summer, I actually get to collaborate with a project management intern. So his task is mostly focused on like figuring out the general direction of the product and also like kind of a little bit of like thinking about what our competitors are, like what the interface should look like for the product and things like that. Whereas me is mostly focused on implementing that thing. So usually in the morning or in the beginning of the week, I will check in with that intern just to kind of clarify like what will be our to-do items for the week and what will be our goals that we want to achieve by the end of the week. And then after that is mostly like doing a lot of research on the things that I need to implement. And this is the point where Googling really comes in handy. And I would definitely say if you're a good programmer, you're definitely a really good Googler because you really know how you need to know like how to find the resource you need via Googling. And even though if you are like a senior engineer, maybe like the besides like the technical experience that you get, you just like get really good at Googling compared to like the junior engineers. So after doing this research, of course, I need to like start coding and also do a lot of debugging on like the program that I wrote. And another aspect is like documentation. So after you write down the code, you also want to document them and try because that is super important in terms of like telling whoever else is reading your code, like how do like what does your code do, like how does that work, and if they want to use your code, how are they going to use it. So documentation is like a super important part in this engineering process just because you want to write code that works, but you also want to write code that works for other people as well. And if I get stuck, I would like ping my mentor on Google Chat, just asking them for help. And then sometimes I also attend like team meetings where I just like kind of report the progress throughout the week to the team. And there's also like some fireside chats or things like that where the company executives get to like it's more like a Q&A with company executives. And there are also like social events where you have some intern mixers where you just get to know like other interns within the company. So yeah, that's basically the day-to-day as a software engineer intern.
What would you say is the most fun part of your day as a software engineer intern?
Oh, I would say the best moments are the ones that after debugging for 1 or 2 or more hours, you finally get it to work. Like even though the debugging process can be super painful, but like the moment that you figure out how to solve the problem is like really amazing, and it's basically something that keeps you going even though like like the next moment when you start working on something new, you're going to start going back to that debugging process again. But it just feels really good.
Okay, so we'll start opening up to our audience here for some more questions. So here's an open Q&A for anyone who wants to ask questions. You could type it in the chat if you don't feel comfortable with speaking, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Sharon from the audience asks in the chat, what do you suggest to young girls who are interested in coding? When would you like to answer that?
You mean like in terms of the technology, or like what exactly
I think
that suggestion is targeting?
Oh yeah, she also asked a more specific questions like what language or activities do you think would help prepare them?
Yeah. So I think Python is a really good starter language to learn just because the syntax is really easy, and there's also a lot of really great tutorials out there just like guiding you how to code a simple Python game, for example. And that is definitely a good language to pick up in the beginning. And even though it's simple, it's actually a super powerful language because Python is used in like the data analysis fields a lot. And a lot of people also, I think it's like almost like the second most popular programming language nowadays. The top most popular so far, I think, is actually Java. So Java is like a more you have stricter syntax in Java, and there is a little bit barrier to entry to Java, but then a lot of good concepts that you learn while you're programming in Java is actually applicable to other languages as well. So it's really good to have a really solid foundation in Java as well. And Java is actually the language that I started coding in. But then if you want to make some project that you can actually see things happening, I would recommend like learning HTML and CSS, just like building up your own website. And you can also learn a little bit about JavaScript, which is actually really different from Java, even though they sound really similar. But then is programming language for web, and it can kind of give more interaction or dynamics to your website. But yeah, I think those are my recommendations that you can start looking into. I know it's a lot, but I say if I have to pick one, I would say go for Python. But yeah.
Another audience member asks, what are some companies slash organizations that offer high school internships?
High school internship. Let's see. Like Autodesk is the one that I know of, just because. But it's like a little bit more regional specific because like I think it only hires like participants in the first robotics competition from the Pacific Northwest region. So it's like super specific. Um, I don't really know of anywhere else at this point. But if you like try to Google it, I believe you can also find out some of them as well. But yeah.
Another audience member asks, how many languages did you learn and what order did you learn them in?
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I actually learned a lot of language, which is even like, okay, let me pull up my resume so that I can like read them out. Let's see. So my first language is Java, like I mentioned, because I use it in my robotics team, and it's also the language we use in the Intro to Programming class I have at my school. And then the second language I learned is C Sharp. So C Sharp is a language that is used by if you need to develop games in Unity, C Sharp is an option. The other option is C++, but that is like a lot more complicated actually. C Sharp have a really similar syntax to Java. So if you know Java, it's really easy for you to transition to C Sharp. And after that, I learned Swift. So Swift is a programming language that you can use to code iOS apps. So if you want to develop mobile apps for Apple, this is the language that you'll go for. And I learned it during the New Technologies program because at that point, that program is using Swift as the language for coding up like the app prototypes. And then after that, I learned Python and HTML and CSS and JavaScript and PHP and SQL actually at the same time. So basically what happens is that there are one quarter at my school where I take a web programming class and a data programming class at the same time. So what happens at that quarter is actually super chaotic because I learned like 6 different languages in the web programming class just because you need to use different languages to do different things for when you're building a website. Whereas on the other hand, I also need to learn Python, which in my data programming class. So that was a really cool experience though, because like you can, as you are like picking up those language and kind of struggling to switch your mindset in between all those different languages, you start to see like the commonality shared between those languages. And in fact, there's a lot of really fundamental concepts in programming that is not language specific. And as you're learning more and more language, you started to see like the common pattern. And it actually helps you to pick up other language really quickly as well, because the only thing that is different is just like remembering what the syntax should be in that different language. And after that, I also learned it's not a language, but it's more like a framework called React. So React is like a really popular web development framework nowadays that a lot of people use, and it's built on top of JavaScript. So if you're interested in web development, once you feel like you have a good hang of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, definitely look into React, because this is a really popular thing that people are using. And finally, in last quarter of my college, I actually learned another language, which is C++ and actually C. So C and C++ are a lot kind of like lower level language, in the sense that those language you are able to interact directly with like the hardware of the computer. So it's not something that as fancy as HTML, CSS, as in the sense that you can build up like a front end or like the interface that you can see, but it's like those languages are really efficient in a sense that because they are built with because like they're designed for building really powerful and efficient applications. Yeah, so like I know there's it's a lot, but then I think in the future, as I move on to my actual full-time job or pick up more internship, I will definitely learn a lot more languages. But it's just like the life of a software engineer. You just need to be really good at picking up new skills and just keep learning.
Great. We have another question. Do you suggest any online resources for learning Python or any other language?
Let's see. Online resources. So Coursera probably have some really cool classes. Let's see. So yeah, wait a sec. Let me send a link to the chat. So I think Coursera has some like free classes that you can look into. And then Unity, if you're interested in like game development or just like some just like interested in starting from building games, you can look into Unity, which is this one. This is a link to like the Unity. So the good thing about starting with Unity when you're building things is that they have really good documentation on everything. So they have a lot of really cool tutorials that can like kind of guide you through every single step. But yeah, this is like the two things that I have in mind right now, but I guess I can also follow up if I come up with more resources later.
Yeah, just a quick shameless self-promo. Our organization is offering Python, Java, and web development courses soon. So keep on the lookout for that. We have another question saying recommendations slash best resources for preparing for technical interviews.
Yes. So I think for high school, it might be a little bit early to mention this, but so usually when people are preparing for technical interview, they use a resource called LeetCode. And LeetCode is one that is like super popular, and the other one is HackerRank. So basically, for these two sites, they kind of have a really similar purpose of like, they just have a lot of like those different algorithm problems, and they would like kind of show you the problem statement, and you need to basically code up a solution to kind of solve those problems. And they also have all those different test cases that you can run. So after you come up the solution, you can like test if that solution works or not. But then I guess if you, for high school students, this might be a higher bar of entry just because it would be, you need to basically, most of the question on there, you need to basically have taken like the first data structures and algorithm class in college to have that kind of theoretical background for you to be more comfortable in terms of like practicing the actual problems on there. And the other book that a lot of people recommend for a coding interview is just something called Cracking the Coding Interview. You can Google the book, and it basically is a book that kind of walks you through the different aspects of like technical interview, and also like talk about some like basic concepts on the data structure. But I would definitely say don't jump too fast into those resources because it's really easy to get discouraged if you don't have like the theoretical background coming into solving those questions. But yeah.
Great. We have another question. What coding language is the best to create a game?
Oof. It depends a lot on what kind of game that you want to create. C++ is a language that a lot of popular game engines use just because, like I said before, C++ is a language designed for building really fast and efficient games. And if you are a gamer, you can imagine that people don't really like to have their games to lag a lot or just like you need to wait a long time for the game to load, etc. And that's why a lot of game developers use C++ to kind of like build up their game to make them as performant as possible. But then C sharp is like C with like a pound sign. So C sharp is a language that Unity use, and actually Unity provides both options. You can either code in C sharp or C++, and C sharp definitely have better syntax, and is like a little bit less complicated than C++ to pick up. But yeah, that's the two that I can think of right now. But I think a lot of other, I think JavaScript, there a lot of people also building up JavaScript games, just like you can run it on the website, and it's also something that people use.
Okay, we have another question. What grade did you start learning programming?
I started at grade 11. So because I moved to the US at grade 11, this is where I start picking up coding. And yeah, I would say like if I have to say the real learning, like hardcore programming, it's like it's more like the freshman year of my college or sophomore year, because when you started to take data structures class is like where you actually get into like the best side of the CS. That's how we can describe it. Yeah.
We have another question. What kind of side projects do you think helped you on your internship?
So I actually didn't do a lot of side projects coming into my internship just because school is really busy. So for me, I don't think any of my side projects would be really like is something that gets me to those internships. But what I really focus on the other side is actually being a teaching assistant. So I am a head teaching assistant for a data programming class at my school. And the nice thing about being a teaching assistant, and I would definitely recommend every one of you, if you're interested in being a teaching, in college, you should definitely explore the opportunity of being a teaching assistant, just because it helps you to kind of practice public speaking and also explain your thought process. And because you're teaching, you're also learning the concept in CS better, and it helps you to prepare for coding interview as well. But yeah.
Okay, we have a really good question. They're saying, I'm really interested in coding, but I'm afraid of giving up in the middle of my progress. Is there any tip for overcoming it?
I think I would just circle back to what I had before. It's just like try to do what excites you because like this is what keeps me going in terms of like coding. If I do something that I'm not interested in, even though I'm coding, it's not something that I want to continue work on. And of course, if you're interested in CS, it doesn't mean you have to code in front of the computer every single day. You definitely need to like take a break. So I would say like if you feel like you have some free time, just like take a look into like some tutorials, just like building up side projects on the side, and every like 3 months or something. It doesn't have to be like doing it every single day.
Okay. Someone's interested in the Stanford program you attended, and they ask, can they still attend that program you attended?
So I think it's something that is still ongoing. So you need to go on the Stanford website and then see, you need to fill out an application. High school summer college. So here is the link to that website. But anyways, they offer a lot of different classes, not just programming classes. So if you're interested in taking classes at Stanford in general, just like go ahead and sign up. But I think the selection process is a little bit rigorous as well. So make sure you kind of like, it's almost like applying to college. So make sure you like have a really good personal statement when you're applying.
Okay. We have another question asking, what's a good way to approach people for referrals?
So me personally doesn't really like just reaching out to people out of the blue, just like, can you give me a referral? So one thing that I recommend is that one, sign up for LinkedIn because this is something that you can build your professional network and you can also find a lot of cool people on LinkedIn. And then just think about what you're interested in. What area of technology are you interested in? Are you interested in data analysis? Are you interested in like web development? Or what kind of companies are you interested in working for? And you can definitely find a lot of like engineers or recruiters on the platform for LinkedIn. And then I would say reach out to engineers in general because recruiters are super busy and they usually like don't respond to your emails. But if you're interested in a particular area of tech, reach out to some engineers who are working on that tech and try to like schedule a 30-minute coffee chat or something. Just talk about how you read about their profile, you're really interested in the work they're doing. Can I schedule a 30-minute coffee chat? And just like ask you questions and learn about your experience. And once you kind of started to build up that relationship, it's easy to like ask for referrals down the road just because now because you have been talking, they have like a better idea of like what you're interested in and what you're good at. And it's like easier for people to refer you. But yeah.
Okay. Someone asked, is it a good idea to pay for the certificates on Coursera to put on the resume?
Let's see. I don't think it's a super good idea. Me personally doesn't really think it's a super good idea because what you want to learn from those Coursera courses is more like the technical aspect, like the technical skills that you want to have. You can like once you take those courses, you can like list them on your resume, and if you're can like kind of do it really involved in those classes, you can like talk about those in your resume as well. And I don't think it's worth the money to like pay for it just because you can always just list it on LinkedIn, and then yeah, and you can talk about it in interviews as well without actually having to that solid certificate that you pay for.
Okay. We have a question asking, how do you score that first internship that opens you to more opportunities?
So my first internship is the high school internship at Autodesk. And basically what happens is that if you're like an FPARC participant in the Pacific Northwest region, you receive an email saying like Autodesk is interested in hiring high school interns. And work on a product called Synthesis, and it's basically a robotic simulator built in the Unity engine, where it allows like programmers or drivers of like robotics team to kind of like import the 3D models of the robot and drive it in a virtual field instead of building it up in the first place. So how I landed that internship is mostly like just like apply. So look for those opportunities. And the first, even though like you feel like you might not have all the qualification, the first tip that I have is just apply, because you'll never know what happens. And things would never happen if you don't apply in the first place. And then after I apply, I think it's mostly like if you are really involved in some sort of like coding projects. For me, it was robotics back in high school. You definitely have like a lot to talk about. So get really good at practicing how you can like describe your experience, like what kind of problem that you have and what kind of approach you take to solve that problem, and what kind of improvement that you wish you made if you get a second chance to work on that project. Is something that is really good to practice for those interview questions.
We have another question. Before the Microsoft internship, did you have any work experience? If so, where?
Yeah, the work experience that I just talked about is like the Autodesk internship. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What is a Facebook community group that you suggested earlier?
Yep. So that community group currently is only opening to like college women, but once you are in college, I would definitely suggest you to apply since your freshman year. So basically, this is a program that kind of runs through your college years, and they have like, for example, if you are okay, so let me just like kind of restart it. So for rewriting code, you can like sign up their website and become a member. So once you're a member, you can join their Facebook group and get access to whatever people are sharing on the Facebook groups. But they also have another position, which is called something called fellow. So as the rewriting the code fellow, you need to fill out an application and you need to go through kind of like a selection process on their side. But then as a fellow, you get more resources. And this year they're starting like a big little mentoring program where upperclassmen can kind of mentor some lowerclassmen for freshmen and sophomores in college, and kind of like talk about their experience and get some help in terms of like internship application and things like that. Yeah, so that's the organization that I'm in.
Okay, we have another question asking, if you're interested in both programming and design, would you double major in computer science and product design?
I think, let's see. Even if you are majoring, I think the first question that you kind of want to ask is like, which one do you like better? So there's not really, it's not saying that if you're majoring in CS, you cannot work in design, because even though if you're in the CS major, there's still different like concentrations within that major. For example, for UW, we have like HCI major, which focus more on like human computer interaction, and you can take some classes that focus more on like the design aspect of things, and you can definitely get that kind of skills. So it doesn't mean that you have to double major in things such that you can take the classes. And I believe a lot of college classes is open to all the majors, so you can like pick up those skills as you go when you're taking those classes.
Great. Our next question is a little bit more general. They're asking, how do I get an internship in high school?
So I guess I don't really have a lot of good tips at this point, because for me, it was mostly like I saw an opportunity and then I go ahead and apply. But then in terms of high school internship, I believe for Microsoft, they have like a high school intern program as well. And for those high school internships, I believe the most things they would look for is like your passion in technology and your ability to learn new things. And if you are interested in getting a high school internship, definitely try to get involved in some coding projects at your school. So if your club needs a new website, you can like offer to help them build it. And in the process, you can like look up resources and pick up new technology. And yeah, and that's like the type of advice I would give. Just keep doing a lot of different coding projects and getting good at describing that experience when you apply.
Okay, next question asks, I'm really interested in graphic design and want to apply this to CS. Would it be a good idea to go into the UX engineering field?
So I guess one thing that I kind of want to clarify about UX engineering is that it's not actually a field where you get to do both design and engineering. So for my project, it's a little bit special in the sense that my mentor is really aware that I know I really like design. So I also have that experience back in the new technologies program. So he kind of tailored that experience for me. So for my project, I actually get to both design like the app that I'm building and also like implement it. But in reality, what UX engineers usually do is that they are building up like the coding components for the UI components. So if you look at like your Zoom interface, for example, you see all those like different buttons, like the participants, chat, and share screen, record, and reactions. All those different all those buttons are just like components, and there are code that kind of run those components. And what UX engineering do is actually like code up all those components and like figure out how to make them as reusable as possible when other engineers want to use those components and build an app really quickly. So yeah, the main part of the job is actually building, like coding, not like designing.
Okay, since we're running out of time, we're just going to answer two more questions people have already sent in the chat. One of them is, do you know any high school internships a beginner can apply to for a CSE?
High school internships? Is that the question? Sorry.
Yeah, they asked any high school internships that a beginner can apply to for CSE.
For CS. The one that I know of is just the Microsoft High School Intern Program. And again, there are probably a lot out there, and they might not be like quote unquote internships, but there are more like summer programs. And I think you don't have to have like that type of internship, especially out of the high school. But you just want to have more experience in all those like different coding programs and get exposure to different technology. So I would just say like Google like coding programs for high schoolers or internship open for high schoolers, and there's some list that will pop up and just apply.
Okay, great. We have our last question asking, if I want to incorporate coding and design major in college, what do I need to prepare in high school?
I would say be coding and design major. Like so in high school, there isn't really a lot of things that you can like kind of prepare because you just I guess one thing that you can prepare well as a high schooler when you're applying to college is definitely do a lot of research on like the colleges and kind of get to know like their design program and their CSE program, and know like what the culture is like in those programs, because you want to make sure the school that you're applying to have really good coding/design programs. And there's also some other colleges out there, I believe, that have like programs that kind of like blend those two areas a little bit better. So definitely look into those and just like I think my biggest advice is just try to do what you're interested in and don't feel too pressured to like be prepared well. I know like nowadays there's a lot of pressure in like starting early and things like that, but you need to also enjoy your high school times and have fun, you know, before you get into college and be super stressed out about everything. So yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll be concluding our panel right now. Thank you, Wen, and thank you for those who came today. As Jen said before, we will have our future courses on Python, web development, and Java. You can see more information for future workshops and panels on our website. Thank you once again, Wen, so much for coming. This was a great panel, and you answered the questions really well. Thank you all for asking questions to Wen, and yeah, thank you for coming.